We want to make sure you say something later, okay? So thank you for being here. Most important housekeeping things first for the women in the room. Somebody lost their earring, so check your ears, everybody. And I have it up here, okay. I'm Kathy Brown. I'm the Senior Vice President for Corporate Responsibility and Public Policy Development at Verizon. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I'm delighted to be part of this great undertaking as a member of the board, and also because Verizon really cares so much about this whole topic, this whole notion of how we, as American citizens, and as we'll talk about this morning, as American companies and enterprises, act and react and are part of the larger world. So we're delighted to be part of this conference. We think it's enormously important, and we congratulate Anne and all of the folks who put this conference on. To remind you once again, I'm sure you were inspired and also probably tweaked to go back and review your history yesterday with the presentations in the morning and what President Eisenhower had to do with this whole start of this movement. As I look around the room, I know that there were some of us that were quite young when he was doing what he did. I was at least alive. I can see some of you who actually were not. And I think you want to go back and take a look at your history around the real drive for stability in the world, for peace, for understanding, so that we would not be at war. I was quite taken with that nugget, that truth piece. And I was also taken with how this circle has gone around in listening to President Obama in the film, and of course to our Undersecretary of State and why and how this administration, and I really think all administrations since, all presidents, all people of goodwill, of democracy, have tried to work toward that end. So I see us as part of that, and to remind you how we can, to build on the enthusiasm here, again we remind you to go to the website at www.usc4cd.org and be among the first to sign the new letter to President Obama to express your commitment to citizen diplomacy and the upcoming 10-year initiative. We think you can share it with friends, and we think we can start a movement. We like movements. So yesterday, I think we focused a lot and we heard a lot about the individual in the world, each person bringing their skills, their enthusiasm, their commitment to change what is not good, to bring what is good, to inspire understanding around the world. And we saw individuals do that. And we saw individuals do that through not-for-profits, for NGOs, as we call them. We saw them do it on their own, but we also saw it in organized ways through groups who were committed to looking very carefully at what very specific things they could do in very specific places to further understanding, to further development, growth, and even when you don't know it, to further U.S. foreign policy, and that is to achieve a peaceful world. Last night, I think we experienced that whole notion through the arts, and we saw that the arts are another way that we as American citizens and as an American nation and culture reach out to the world to engage it. And I was quite inspired, I know you were, by the stories we heard and by the expressions of our American culture dreams and aspirations through the arts. This morning, we want to turn to yet another great American institution, that is our companies. That is the great American enterprises that are investing around the world, that are putting people to work, that are creating wealth, and that are understanding in their multinational undertakings that we too, American companies, are part of the great American story, and that we too are representative not only of ourselves, but of the country in which we were born, and the way in which we do business. And we think and know that this is an important part of this whole environment, this whole notion of who we are in the world. Over the last number of years, I think it's fair to say that American companies have paid closer attention, although they have always been involved, I think, and you'll see in the companies that are going to speak this morning, they have a history of being involved in their own communities and in understanding that they need to be part and participants in the communities in which they operate. But there has been a deepening of that notion over the last number of years through this whole notion of corporate social responsibility. It has really become a discipline. And you're going to hear from folks this morning who have not only wished for good things to happen through American companies, but who work at it every day, and who have gathered the resources of our various companies to make sure that we are part of the process of economic growth and stability around the world. The whole discipline in which we are involved, I think, comes down to three aspects, and I'll say them and then we'll get on with hearing others speak. One is the way in which we do business. What are our core values? How do we operate? How do we conduct ourselves in the business of business? And that really goes to our ethics, to our respect for others, to the way in which we engage the world. The second aspect of this notion of corporate responsibility, or as I talk about it, corporate citizenship, goes to this notion that when we produce a good or a service that the world sees as necessary or as enhancing to health, to welfare, to the way of life, to the growth of their families. When the world sees American companies create new miracles, they want a piece of it. They want those miracles to happen to them. And part of our corporate citizenship, our responsibility, is to think through and have strategies that those great achievements can reach the rest of the world. So for Verizon, of course, this is all about technology, about connectivity. You probably know us as a wireless company. Most of you, others know us that we're an internet provider, but we're also the builder and provider of what you know as the global internet. Those are all our networks around the world in 170 countries. And we operate around the world. So part of this notion of corporate responsibility is what do we do about these great miracles that we invent here and produce here for other peoples around the world. And how is it we do business? What is our human rights stance throughout the world? How do we respect others? And the third piece goes to how we use the resources that are the basis of the things we produce. So we know that we use minerals, we use water, we use land. And that whole area of sustainability, that any growth and investment has to be sustainable, has taken hold very deeply in our companies. So this morning's speaker and this morning's panel are going to go deeper into these aspects of what we think of as corporate social responsibility. But I want you also to think about diplomacy as you listen. So our first speaker we're very, very fortunate to have this morning. Ingrid Saunders Jones is the Senior Vice President of the Coca-Cola Company, and she is Chairperson of the Coca-Cola Foundation. Now, as I go about the world here and in other places, it's inevitable that we're on the podium with Coca-Cola, and you will find out why in a moment. The work they're doing throughout the world is actually life-changing, and I think you're going to appreciate that as you listen to her. She's an enormously interesting person. She started as a teacher in her career She headed a non-for-profit in her early career. She was an intern, a government intern in government, worked for the mayor, so she's had the government experience. And then she went into corporate America, into Coke. I remember when I was a student, a exchange student back in those days when I was 20 years old in Africa in 1973 in Uganda. And I remember my first reaction when I landed on the ground and looked up, and there it was, the Coke sign. And I thought, my, America is everywhere, isn't it? And I think any of you who have traveled anywhere will look up and see that sign. Well, that is a presence that is quite powerful, I think. And so to tell us how, please welcome Ingrid Saunders Jones.
And one of the delights of my life is that people send me pictures of those signs from all over the world. They do, they see, and tell me the stories related to those signs. So I thank you very much for that introduction. And it is really a pleasure to be here this evening. I want to brag on Kathy for just a minute because, you know, she's responsible for the Verizon Foundation, and just 2 weeks ago, Corporate Responsibility magazine named Patrick Gaston, the president of the Verizon Foundation, as the Corporate Foundation Leader of the Year, and I think that deserves a round of applause. I looked at your conference brochure, and this is a very, very serious conference, even though I heard you took a break last night, had a little fun, but there are many people to be acknowledged, and I, of course, cannot acknowledge all of them. But I think, you know, in the context of why we have gathered, we have to thank Ann Shoddy and Dr. David Rose and the entire State Department, U.S. State Department. We must thank them for recognizing the power of citizen diplomacy. You know, Secretary Hillary Clinton, and of course Judith McHale, who I met in her first life at the Discovery Channel. Nancy Smith-Nissley, Senior Coordinator in Economic Policy and Public Diplomacy of the U.S. State Department, I want to do a special shout out to you because I want to commend you for your work spearheading the Secretary of State's Award for Corporate Excellence, or the ACE Award. For about a decade, Nancy has worked to highlight companies that are doing good work overseas. And if I might brag a moment, Coca-Cola won the award for corporate excellence in 2002 for our work in Egypt, and we are a finalist this year for projects in Swaziland. And I can tell you that when the Secretary of State shines a spotlight on companies that are doing good work, it motivates all of us in the private sector to step up our game. So we thank you, Nancy. To each and every one of you, I bring you greetings from our CEO and Chairman, Muhtar Kent, and the nearly 1 million Coca-Cola system associates around the world. I want to recognize some of them who are in the room. They always act like they don't know me when I do this, but you know, in this town, when I come to this town, I always tell people I'm a friend of Janet Howard's, okay? Janet Howard, Director of Diplomatic Relations in our D.C. office. We have Amy Githens here, who is Director of Community Partnerships, Lynn Hinkle, who's my Executive Assistant, Wanda Rodwell, who is Director of Communications for Global Community Connections, and Helen Price, who is Executive Director of the Coca-Cola Foundation and an Assistant Vice President of the company. Won't you all stand? Thank you. Today I'm honored to share some ideas with you about corporate social responsibility within the context of citizen diplomacy and the role that business can play in bringing people around the world closer together. I'm not here to deliver a commercial for the Coca-Cola company. I'm proud of what we do, and I'll tell you about some of the things we do, but we don't have all the answers, and I'll be the first to admit that. I'm here because Coca-Cola over time has learned some important lessons about building effective partnerships between business, government, and civil society. And if the United States is going to reach the goal of this summit, doubling the number of citizen diplomats in 10 years, the right partnerships are required. And as we look at the most effective partnerships, I hope you would agree that business as a sector can bring speed, scale, and support to the work that you all are doing in the world. But let me be the first to say that partnering with companies is not always easy, especially because corporate social responsibility is in an evolving process, and what companies look for is changing also. So this morning, let's talk about how companies think about corporate social responsibility. Let's talk about how we find points of intersection between your work and potential corporate partners. 3 questions. Why do companies engage in corporate social responsibility? Why is CSR evolving beyond pure philanthropy? And what are the keys to successful partnerships? When I think about CSR and global citizen diplomacy, I think about the one and the only one of my heroes, John Gardner. As most of you know, he was the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under President Lyndon Johnson and a brilliant thinker and writer. He created Common Cause and the White House Fellows Program, which I understand the Center's chairman, Dr. David Rowe, participated in. And I will say parenthetically, it was the White House Fellows Program that Atlanta adopted as the Atlanta Fellows Program and got me to Atlanta from Detroit, Michigan. And I went for a fellowship that was going to last 1 year, and that was back in the late 70s. And here I am all these years later. But in 1980, John Gardner co-founded the Independent Sector, a coalition of 800 organizations that support giving and volunteering across America. John Gardner said, and I quote, "When the American spirit awakens, it transforms worlds, but it does not awaken without a challenge. Citizens need to understand that this moment in history does, in fact, present a challenge that demands the best that is in them." That's what he said then. I think it still holds true now. To me, that is the essence of citizen diplomacy. It's about American citizens awakening the spirit of America in a moment of challenge so that we can help transform worlds. And we certainly are entering a decade that will challenge us to think and work in new ways. This summit has set a goal for the next 10 years, and so has the Coca-Cola Company. Our chairman has a vision. He helped us all work through a collective vision for our company's 2020 vision. Our 2020 vision is more than an aspiration. It is a concrete document. Show and tell. It is a concrete document and a mindset that guides our every action every day. Now let me mention just a few of the big trends that informed us as we developed this and will have an impact on our work and the work of everybody in this room as we go forward. In the next 10 years, 1 billion people will enter the middle class, and 60% of them will be in emerging nations. The world is becoming older in many places like Japan and Europe, but at the same time, youth populations are surging in India, Asia, Latin America, and North America. The world will become more urban as people move from the farm to the city. In 2008 was the first year that more people lived in cities than rural areas around the world, and that trend will continue. And finally, with more people and more wealth, we're going to see constant scarcity of energy and natural resources. The coming decade presents challenges that, in John Gardner's words, demand the best from each of us. And the truth is that not one of us has all the answers. But I'm convinced that whatever problem you're having, there's someone in this room who has the answer. There's someone maybe at the next table from an NGO, government, or business who has a special insight that can help you and help all of us. And to me, that's the true power of the summit. The people in this room are the ones who can build creative collaborations that will change the world. So let me turn to our first question. Why do companies engage in corporate social responsibility? People are skeptical about companies these days. We feel it, I know. My colleagues in corporate America feel it. And some wonder if our CSR is just PR. I think it's helpful to just kind of go back and revisit the definition. Kathy touched on it in my introduction, but I pulled the definition from the Boston Center for Corporate Philanthropy. And it says that corporate social responsibility is the business strategy that shapes the values underpinning a company's mission and that influences the choices made each day by its executives, managers, and employees. And that's what our 2020 vision is designed to do. Influence the choices that we make every day. So I can't speak for all companies, but I can share 4 reasons why the Coca-Cola Company engages in corporate social responsibility at its core. First, our values and culture have always included having a responsibility to and engagement with our consumers and the communities where we do business. Second, we recognize that to have a sustainable business, the companies we serve must be, the communities we serve must be sustainable themselves. And we believe we have a role to play in building and maintaining sustainable communities. As we prepare, as the Coca-Cola Company prepares to celebrate 125 years of business in the year 2011, we also believe that our DNA has always been linked to sustainable communities. Third, we are a local company everywhere we do business. Now, that may sound surprising, but as Kathy said, because we are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, we are an American iconic company, but if you look at our business structure, we have a franchise business model made up of local bottlers around the world. And that means our system, our employees, we're all the neighbors around the world. We are the neighbors, the parents, and the citizens in those respective communities. Our employees want to help make their community stronger, and they expect their company to be a part of that effort and any solutions that are required. So we engage in CSR because the communities we serve are also the communities where we live. And fourth, consumers are increasingly expecting companies to be a part of the solution. As our chairman and CEO, Muhtar Kent, has said, the consumer of the future will choose a company as much for its character as the quality of its products. Consumers are making choices with their wallets, so the character and values of our companies are very critical. And one of the ways we express our values is through partnerships to support the community. I mentioned that our first reason we engage in CSR is because of our values, and I know that that may sound very hokey, but it is the fact. We started out with a fairly local focus, but we have grown and become global, and so has our engagement with the communities in the world. We're 124 years old, and our engagement with the community is a thread that is consistent and runs throughout our history. Our Robert Woodruff, our chairman in the 40s and 50s, said, he was actually quoting Mr. Gambal of Gambal's department store, but it kind of became his quote. He said, "There is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." Of course, we would modify that in this day and age to say there is no limit to what a man or a woman can do or where he or she can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. And indeed, Mr. Woodruff, who was known as Mr. Anonymous, never sought credit. But he firmly guided the company's philanthropy in Atlanta, in Georgia, and in the United States, and he used his personal funds to build libraries, to fund universities, and to support human service organizations. Our next chairman, two chairmen after that, Roberto Goizueta, is known in the business world as just an excellent leader. He was in the late 20th century, and I quote him when I say, "I believe we in business have an obligation to give something back to the communities we support. We must all, by deed and by example, create the community we want." Our immediate past chairman is Neville Isdale, and he said, "The health of our business is directly linked to the sustainability of communities we serve and therefore the overall well-being of the planet." And our current CEO, Muhtar Kent, has said, "Sustainability and social responsibility are not public relations initiatives or compliance checkoffs or nice to-dos. In a world where populations are growing, where natural resources are stretched, where communities are forced to do more with less, and where consumers' expectations are expanding, sustainability and social responsibility are core to our business continuity and our business survival." And so, the leadership has changed. The depth, the breadth, and the scope of our business has changed. But the commitment to corporate social responsibility as a core value of the Coca-Cola Company has remained the same. In my mind, as a company, we have engaged with the world through our business, one handshake, two smiles, and one Coca-Cola at a time. Our chairman is passionate about building stronger communities. His passion impacts everything we do, including our vision and aspiration for our future. In fact, he was just named Responsible CEO of the Year by Corporate Responsibility magazine. It's not only because of the big commitments he's made, like pledging to empower 5 million women entrepreneurs throughout the Coca-Cola system by 2020, but also because of the personal commitments he's made in areas like citizen diplomacy. You may remember that when President Obama spoke in Cairo last year, he called for a new beginning between the U.S. and Muslims. Our CEO, Muhtar Kent, stepped forward to serve as vice chair of Partners for a New Beginning, an outreach program announced by Secretary Hillary Clinton. Madeleine Albright, as many of you know, is the chair, and Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute is the other vice chair. They're working together to build bridges of understanding with Muslims around the world, focusing initially on Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and the Palestine Authority area. Now let me turn to the second question I raised. How is CSR evolving? We have been supporting our communities since we were founded. I think I proved that to you by quoting our chairman. But the ways that we engage, The ways have changed, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. We've become more strategic in the causes we support. We are more focused on leveraging our own expertise, and we are more collaborative in working with partners. For many companies, CSR used to mean only philanthropy, donating money to a lot of worthy causes. We still do philanthropy, but like many companies, our approach to CSR goes beyond that. Indeed, we've become more strategic. In the past, we always donated to good causes, but we were fairly broad in the types of causes we supported. This year, the Coca-Cola Company and our foundation will provide about $82 million for community initiatives. Today, when we donate money and products, we focus on 4 areas that are relevant to our business and where we bring special expertise. About 3 years ago, as we were developing our 2020 vision, as we were really kind of transforming the structure and the work of our company, we also, as a function, a global community connections function, were in the process of redefining our 2020 vision, and we came up with 4 areas for focus: water, active, healthy living, community recycling and sustainable packaging, and education. Water, indeed, is the main ingredient in all of our products. It is essential for life and for our business. In some communities, as you well know, water resources are stressed, so we've made that an area of focus, and recently we launched the Replenish Africa initiative, and we call it RAIN. It's a $30 million commitment to provide clean water to people across Africa. Africare, one of the best NGOs working on the continent in Africa, is one of our partners, and together we will help create 100 healthy watersheds and provide clean water and sanitation to an additional 2 million citizens of Africa by the year 2015. Now, that's an example of the scale and speed that business can bring in an area of strategic importance. Another focus area is helping people live healthy, active lifestyles. To do that, we offer a wide variety of beverages with clear information on nutrition, and we support education and physical activity programs around the world. Again, third priority is recycling and sustainable packaging. We create a lot of packaging and we want to collect it back and recycle it. One example of a partnership is between Coca-Cola North America and United Resource Recovery Corporation in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where we have created the world's largest bottle-to-bottle recycling plant, and in its first year, it recycled more than 1 billion PET bottles. And last but certainly not least, education. We are a longtime supporter of education programs because educating one child lifts up not just an individual, but a family and a community. And in the United States, the Coca-Cola First Generation Scholarship Program has reached students in more than 450 college campuses across the country, and we're looking to duplicate that other places, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. All of our operating units can also select local priorities, and they include HIV/AIDS and malaria in Africa and in Latin America, so that they can, because they know what is most needed in the territories that they serve. The second way our approach has changed or evolved is we are now doing more to leverage our expertise. We have special skills in marketing, supply chain, and distribution. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and the Gates Foundation provided a lot of support for medical care in Tanzania, as an example. But they found that the medicines were sitting in storage facilities instead of getting to the people who needed them. So these partners came to us and said, and I'm paraphrasing, if you can get Coca-Cola into the most remote villages around the world, can you help us get our medicines distributed? We studied their process, and we found that there were serious blockages in their supply chain. We found they didn't have enough pallets, and their scheduling and routing systems were inadequate. So in August, we launched a 5-month pilot project to create an effective way to get medical supplies to the people who need them. We joined with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and our executing partner, Accenture Development Partnerships. That's one example of how we're using our expertise and partnering with governments and civil society to help solve problems. Our CSR approach has evolved in other ways. We've become more collaborative in working with partners in government and civil society. And for me, this is the most exciting part because each partner brings different talents to the table. The example I want to share comes from Haiti. We're all so concerned about Haiti right now, from the earthquake to the hurricane to the cholera outbreak. What happens there, I think you'll agree, just breaks your heart. Coca-Cola has been a part of the Haitian community since 1927, and our bottler is the country's largest private employer. When the people of Haiti were at the lowest moment following the earthquake, we knew we had to step up and do something different. It was not just about getting water into Haiti quickly, and we did that. We got water from the Dominican Republic very quickly to Haiti. It was not just about donating $2 million to the Red Cross. We did that. We stepped back and asked, what can we do to help rebuild the entrepreneurial infrastructure of Haiti? We saw that more than 60% of the Haitian population derives revenue from agriculture, but the earthquake wiped out the small-scale mango farmers. We saw an opportunity to help them get back on their feet. It was an ambitious idea that would require building an entire value chain, from nurseries and farms to contracts, financing, and transportation. We knew we couldn't do it alone, so we formed a creative collaboration with a series of partners: the Inter-American Development Bank, the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, USAID, TechnoServe, and the government of Haiti. And I want you to know that the U.S. State Department was absolutely critical in making this global partnership happen. We set up a system where farmers can increase their production and sell their mangoes to us. We use those mangoes to make a product, Adwala Haiti Hope Mango Limeade. And each one of you, show and tell, remember I started out as a teacher, has one in front of you. 100% of the profits from that product go back into that into the project. So we created a virtuous cycle, not just one-time help after a disaster, but a cycle that gives Haitian farmers new tools to grow and a new market to sell to, and lets consumers choose to support a new cause. The Haiti Hope Project is a 5-year, almost $8 million effort with one goal: to double the income of 25,000 mango farmers in Haiti. To me, that represents the cutting edge in corporate social responsibility. It's philanthropic. Thank you. It's philanthropic because we are making big donations. It's collaborative and all of that. My time is running out, and we have a great deal to hear from our panelists, so I'm going to close now. I've tried to give you examples of how we engage one person at a time where we do our business. Afzal Malik, my colleague, will be on a panel this afternoon. He will have more examples. But I do want to close by sharing with you one of the quotes that is most important to me and I often use. It is by John Henrik Clark. He was a historian and scholar from the state of Georgia, and he said that history is a clock that people use to tell their time of day. It tells them who they are and what they are. It helps them find themselves, like a compass, on the map of human geography. I think those of us who live our lives well as individuals, as institutions, NGOs, as companies, understand that it is what we do today that writes the history of tomorrow. Well, the pen has been passed to us to write a special history for the United States of America. Let's use this summit to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to build new creative collaborations between business, government, and civil society. Thank you very much.
Ingrid, thank you so much. I know on my way home I'm going to get a package of Diet Coke. I really appreciate the richness of what Coke is doing as a member of the corporate global fabric. And we heard Ingrid really end that presentation with this notion of collaboration between our great corporations, our great government, and the NGOs who are closest, I think, to actual delivery of services to folks in many respects. So the panel we've put together, I think, we hope will go a little deeper into this collaboration. And let me tell you who they are, and then we're just going to just delve right in. John Four is the Associate Director of the Institute of Corporate Responsibility at George Washington University. And he is going to tell us a bit about the research that supports our notion that connecting these dots actually has an impact. Nancy Dorn is Vice President of Corporate Government Relations for GE, another one of our great iconic companies who is doing so many things around the world. And speaking of iconic companies, we have Stanley Litow, who is the Vice President of Corporate Citizenship and Corporate Affairs at IBM. Nancy Smith-Nissley, who you've already heard about, is our dynamo from the State Department. She's the Senior Coordinator of Economic Policy and Public Diplomacy. And Deirdre White is a person I've learned to love during our journey getting this conference underway. She is the President and CEO of CDC Development Solutions, an NGO that is in the midst of this collaboration. So, John, let me turn to you first and ask you to talk a little bit, having heard now Ingrid speak and knowing what it is that we want to go deeper into. Could you tell us a little bit about what your research shows about the connection between business, stability, peace, economic development?
Yes, gladly. It's very nice to be here. I'm actually here for my colleague, whose name is Tim Fort. He took ill at the last minute, but I was glad to come in and speak for him. I really appreciated the remarks that Ingrid made. You may have seen I was taking some notes. I teach an undergraduate class, business introduction. We talk about corporate social responsibility, so that gave me some nice points to introduce into class, so that was great. One of the areas where Tim and I work on is generally business and peace. And when we first started working on it, Tim's been working on it longer than I thought, business and peace. I wonder if there's another word we can use. Peace seems to suggest hippies or something not quite so serious. But after working with it, I think peace is the right word. And so I'm going to talk about that. And although Tim is ill, he was able to email me his remarks. And so I'm going to speak, basically, and do his remarks. And I'm sorry if I don't have very good eye contact. Not only am I going to try to stay on message, but I'm going to try to stay on text and kind of read the prepared remarks and then be glad to answer any questions from that. So, 20 years ago, an Albanian refugee lived with Tim for 3 months. He had escaped communist Albania with 2 brothers and some friends, and they were living in a refugee camp in Belgrade. The State Department had approved refugees coming to the U.S. from this camp if a U.S. family provided lodging for 3 months and helped them learn English, find a job, and navigate some of the immigration issues, and that was Tim's family. So Petrov was the name of the refugee, and he had related that practicing any religion in communist Albania was punishable by death. And so one night after dinner, Tim figured he was in for a long conversation when Petrov asked, "So who is God?" And with his graduate degree in theology, Tim started to plunge into a very long answer. But Petrov interrupted him and said, "You know, I hate Muslims." And Tim said, "Well, how can you hate Muslims?" Petrov said, "You don't even know who God is." And he said, "Well, I hate Muslims." And he said, "Well, why?" And he answered, "Well, because I'm Catholic." And he said, "Petrov, you have not even been able to practice Catholicism. What does it mean to be a Catholic?" "Well, it means I hate Muslims." So the conversation went around a bit. And remembering Petrov's history, Tim asked him, he said, "Well, say, who did you work with when you were in Albania?" And he said, "Well, just a bunch of guys." He said, "Well, yeah, I know, but were they Muslim? Were they Catholic? Were they something else?" He said, "Oh, about half Muslim, half Catholic." He said, "Well, what did you think of the Muslims that you worked with?" He said, "Oh, they were okay." Well, that seemed a rather remarkable observation, right? To, on one hand, say that you hate a group, a whole religion, and then on the other hand, work with them day in, day out, and find that they're okay. When Tim later became an academic, he kept this conversation in mind, and he started working on this area of business and peace. And recognizing that, of course, businesses may not necessarily be the best examples of good practices, being, honest about it. Some are exploitive, some can be environmental degrading, even agents of imperialism. But at the same time, there are certain kinds of businesses that bring positive economic developments and getting people together from different backgrounds. And these businesses generally, Tim has labeled ethical business and responsible businesses. So let me just say a little bit more about that. So in the research and his 3 books on business and peace, Tim has looked at those characteristics of relatively peaceful societies, and what he found was that they map pretty well with the same kinds of accepted ethical business practices. And that basically, if I had to summarize, and he tries to those 3 books in about 20 seconds, he said that there is general consensus around what makes for good behaviors, that they tend to lead to peace and harmonious relationships. And you don't have to make some big philosophical arguments about whether these are good practices or well-received practices, because they're really not controversial in themselves. Most people recognize them as what the right thing to do is. And so his thesis has been that while ethics and CSR activities have their own values and their own merits, and there are arguments for them, they have an additional and unexpected payoff. They are contributors towards the makers of peaceful diplomatic societies. And in addition, whether diplomacy is about improving relations with one country or bringing greater senses of justice and economic development, CSR and business ethics is not just kind of a warm, fluffy stuff or issue. It is the behavioral stuff that can reduce conflict and lead to peace and harmony. And this is where we've been doing a lot of our work, that is trying to understand what is it that businesses do and how does that affect, on the ground, activities that can reduce conflict and can advance peace. So then businesses themselves and then other members of that society and that community can recognize those actions and the contributions that they made. So let's see, in the name of time, let me try to move here. I think I would say today that where the action is today in this area is to try to identify what the business and government policies are that are most effective in the right circumstances in supporting those business activities that advance peace. We have a pretty good idea of what good practices look like, what ethical business practices should be like, what good corporate social responsible practices should be like. And the argument is that by just doing that, by just pursuing that course, that in and of itself is what advances peace. I think many times people who talk about programs, business involvement in peace programs, see it as some special program. something outside of the norm, where our work and our effort is believing that the peace dividend, if you will, comes as the core activity of businesses acting just as you would want them to act for any other reason. And so the questions that I'm kind of left with today are specifically, what are those actions? What can businesses do? What can't they do? What works and what doesn't work? The second question really is, what are the partnerships, we might call the network governance arrangements, that businesses can participate to then more effectively implement their policies and then more effectively bring about peace? And how can we integrate these interests and these business activities into business strategic planning and to operations? So as an overview, that's the framework that we use. And we have a number of research projects that we're working on, really trying to identify, both at the case study level and the more general level, what are really those actions businesses take, and try to identify what is that real connection between business and peace. And then secondly, what are the government policies that are undertaken, and whether they encourage or discourage, whether intentionally or unintentionally, those particular business activities. So then we have a more integrated kind of a strategy.
Well, okay, now I'm excited. Okay, so Nancy and then Stan, why don't we speak to that? What are the practices? Listening to John, I think you have some things you can add now. Nancy, why don't you go first?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us on GE on this panel. GE is one of the world's best-known companies, known for technology, known for process excellence, known for a global character. We have about 300,000 employees now, about half of whom are outside the U.S. And the other thing that has really characterized GE in its 130-some-odd-year history is change. And I think that the move to corporate social responsibility has been an evolution. A company like GE has always been a good citizen, paid their taxes, participated in the community, but I think it's become more, in recent years, a more imperative job for everybody in the company. And I mean, my piece of the company is really in government engagement and in the policy sense. So, and I'm also a member of the GE Foundation, which has become a much bigger piece of our kind of portfolio of socially responsible actions. But it in GE has become everybody's job, and that means everything from engagement with NGOs, which we've been, I think, very prominent of in recent years for the activities that we've done on eco-imagination, which has been epitomized in the carbon constraint coalition that we built in U.S. CAP to advocate for a carbon policy here in the U.S. It also meant developing products that were available to the public that really did advance the ball on water conservation, energy conservation, and green products. Healthy Imagination is the other recent initiative that we've undertaken that really is about cost, quality, and access in healthcare, a hot topic in Washington and really around the world. But it's about trying to have the whole sort of suite of products and policy that supports those products that is good for not only GE, and we're very straightforward about that, but it's also good for the world. It develops economies. It develops a better society and community through better health care or better environmental policies. My chairman is a man of sometimes many words, but sometimes few. Green is green. We believe that actually developing the products and developing a sound economy is really a basic tenet of good social responsibility. So I would say that as you look across GE, it is that corporate social responsibility has become everybody's job. It's also become something. The other thing that GE is very, very good at is measuring things. And so in the spirit of show and tell, we put out now an annual report on corporate social responsibility that on page 8 actually outlines our commitments and then measures them. There's nothing about getting anybody's attention better in the General Electric company than to tell them not only are you to do it, but you're going to be measured on it, and it's available to the public. It's transparency is another tenet of this, and I think for any company, it's sometimes a struggle, but it's an important component of this new compact that we have with our customers, our partners, our governments around the world, and it is an evolution. I'd say that we're close to nirvana on this. I think it's in the last 10 years under Chairman Jeff Immelt, it's become a much more central part of our company's culture, and it's become a more central part of our company's face to the world.
So, Stan, you're an international company, and maybe you can add to this dialogue.
I'll do my best. I think that the statement about what is corporate social responsibility, is it separate from the business, is it connected to the business, and what role does it play in citizen diplomacy? I would echo a comment by Rosabeth Moss Kanter at the Harvard Business School. She was writing about the IBM approach to corporate social responsibility, and she called it from spare change to real change. Spare change being you do your business in whatever way you do your business, and then you contribute some of your spare change in a method of giving back into the community, separate from the business. Real change is corporate responsibility. Citizenship is part of how you build an effective business. And it's the core element of your business strategy, and it has very specific and quantifiable economic returns about how you build an effective business for your employees, your clients, and your shareholders in the global economy. Number one, if you're trying to build an effective business, you need to recruit and retain top talent, the absolute best people. You can't have an effective company, and you can't build it on a global basis unless you have the best talent and keep the best talent. And what we've discovered is that in terms of recruiting the best talent, whether they're from computer science departments, over 220,000 engineers who work at IBM, or the total number of 435,000 employees who work for the company across 170 countries, they're more likely to come to work for IBM based upon your track record in the area of corporate responsibility. And they're more likely to stay at the company when others come hunting them, call them headhunters, looking for them to try to steal them away. They're more likely to stay. So in the competition for talent, corporate responsibility and citizenship is a critical element. Now, we're an innovation company. We spend more on research and development than any other company on the planet. We have research labs all around the world, and we develop our best innovation and technology through our corporate responsibility initiatives. We built a virtual supercomputer called World Community Grid to contribute very powerful supercomputing talent and technology to drive basic humanitarian research around the planet. It made a big difference in the area of water quality, food, health care, but it also helped contribute intellectual capability to the company to build into projects and services. And there's nothing wrong with that. So it has an absolute benefit to the company, an absolute benefit to society. Third, many of these elements of corporate responsibility affect your bottom line. Green computing, green data centers, better efforts in terms of recycling and environmental activity. They have an economic return. 40% of our IBM U.S. employees work from home. They expend less fuel. They provide benefits into the environment. They're also better employees for the company. And finally, it's about innovation and creativity, and we do that through our corporate responsibility activities. And we've discovered that the way you train top leaders in the company is by engaging them in their communities around the world to solve critical problems. First of all, it's what they want to do. Second of all, it contributes significant benefit into the community. And then it gives us a better trained workforce for the company. We will be 100 years old in 2011. Everybody's talking about an anniversary. Centennial is a really interesting time. We have 158,000 employees who do regular community service. In 5 years, they contributed 10 million hours worth of community service all over the planet. You know, more than any other company, and that's a good thing, but it's not enough, because we have as a goal in our centennial of having all 435,000 people engaged and involved in community service through incentives that the company offers them, grants to match their time and talent into the community in a very effective way. Later I'll talk about an IBM program called the Corporate Service Corps. We partner with Deirdre, where we have 1,000 of our top talent engaged in Peace Corps-like activities around the world in 20 different countries, doing on-the-ground activities to grow local economies and to really exemplify citizen diplomacy. So the final thing I would say is this isn't separate from building an effective business. Socially responsible investment funds control $1 trillion worth of assets. And they have a choice to make. They can invest in companies that are good companies financially, and they can refuse to invest in companies that are bad in the area of corporate social responsibility. There are a variety of ranking and rating systems. Ceres is one. Covalence is another. They rank the companies. We're delighted to be number one on both because it affects socially responsible investment fund decision-making and contributes to your bottom line. So if you're a business and you care about your shareholders and you care about your economic value, if you don't care about corporate social responsibility, you're making a bad business decision. So that's our perspective.
Thank you, Stan. So Nancy, how does the United States government through the State Department support all this around the world?
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to Ingrid for mentioning the Secretary of State's Award for Corporate Excellence program, known as the ACE. Of course, we're government, we have to have an acronym. So it is the ACE program. Also, thank you to the Center for referencing the ACE program in your agendas, in your programs, and so forth. It was established in 1999 by Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. And the purpose of the ACE program really is to recognize the important role that businesses play in being good corporate citizens around the world. We're all talking about citizen diplomacy, and the business community plays a key role in citizen diplomacy around the world. In fact, the core tenets of CSR, corporate social responsibility, are really complementary to both our diplomatic and our diplomacy efforts. The ACE really helps define America and American business as a positive force in the world, where companies do, in fact, lead by example. And the ACE recognizes contributions that companies make around the world to improving lives abroad, but also to improving lives at home. So this is kind of like our Academy Awards, if you will, when the Secretary of State recognizes companies for the work that they do in good corporate citizenship, innovation, exemplary business practices, etc. The ACE nominees that we get every year are presented to us by U.S. ambassadors around the world. The ACE program does not accept self-nominations. A company cannot nominate themselves for the ACE award. The nominations must come from our ambassadors around the world. And the ACE Principal Selection Committee is an interagency committee that reviews all the nominations. So whether a company reaches the finalist status or even becomes a winner, the information is still reviewed by some of the top people, some of the top officials in the Washington area. And Secretary Clinton will, in fact, present the awards this year, following the tradition, starting back with Secretary Madeleine Albright and continuing through Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. The Secretary will present the awards this year on December 17th so you can all tune in. The ceremony is open to the press. It's broadcast live worldwide, and it will be at 12 o'clock noon Washington time. The past winners are both large companies, like some of the ones represented here, who are past ACE winners, but also small companies. And we're not talking about a cast of thousands. Typically, the ACE is presented to one large company and one small company. Sometimes we've had as many as 3, but no more. I'm delighted to have past winners with us today, such as GE and Coca-Cola for the work that they have done in the past. And again, GE was nominated and has been named a finalist for Swaziland, and GE has been named a finalist for 2010 from India. So what the ACE program actually does is tries to encourage and support and promote businesses to establish a healthy workforce, have an informed customer base, and encourage free enterprise, promoting good business practices around the world. Let me just quote Secretary Clinton in her remarks from last year's ACE ceremony. American businesses can do much more than sell goods and services. They can bring hope and optimism to communities abroad. They can inspire others to take risks to become entrepreneurs and grow their own businesses. They can really give people the sense that the private sector can make a difference, a lasting, sustainable difference, and they can do well as doing good. So to kind of piggyback on John's remarks, we believe the State Department that CSR does contribute to peaceful and democratic societies. And frankly, the U.S. government cannot do it alone. We have only about 200 plus U.S. embassies around the world. There are tens of thousands of business executives, NGO representatives, students, teachers, academicians of all sorts. You get around the world and you basically dwarf the number of people that we have in our U.S. embassies. We need your help. We look to you to be more globally engaged and interculturally aware. And again, following on Ingrid's comments and show and tell, somewhere out there, I hope, that Tom and Natalie and Ann have these ACE brochures set out. These are our little brochures that explain the criteria of the ACE program. Basically, the program is based on the OECD guidelines, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development guidelines for multinational enterprises. And if you look at the back of this brochure with the Secretary's photo, you will see a quote from the Secretary and a website. But let me just conclude by referencing this little brochure where the Secretary has said, investing in our common humanity through corporate social responsibility and social responsible development are not marginal to our foreign policy, but essential to the realization of our goals. And I'll close with that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Deirdre, I know you will be running a workshop this afternoon that is going to really dive deep into this idea of collaboration between the corporate interests that are in country, the government, and the NGOs that are on the ground. I thought maybe you could help us frame that conversation.
So thank you very much. Thanks to my co-panelists, and thank you very much, Ingrid, as well, for your comments. What really strikes me sitting here as I think about this afternoon's panel, which is specifically about the nuts and bolts of how you bring together business and government and the social sector to do good development programming. What's so interesting is all of these programs are so very, very different. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and part of the reason is because of how this space has morphed from philanthropy to good business decisions. So even looking back 10 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago when USAID started the Global Development Alliance, which was designed to bring together business and the not-for-profit sector with USAID, create public-private partnerships to do development work. But the role of business really at the outset there was to write a check that matched the USAID check, and the NGO would collect it and go out and do some work. And that's what it looked like, and that's what a lot of these programs looked like. But that's not sustainable. And so when you hear all of these businesses saying it's good for business, we make money on this in the long run. It's a good investment. It's not corporate social responsibility. It's corporate social investment. It's good for our bottom line, and it's okay that it's good for our bottom line. And I think that is such a change in mindset. And it's happened gradually, so we don't realize it. But we see examples of this all over the place and in some unlikely sectors, to be frank. We work in Angola with a consortium of oil and gas companies, 5 big oil and gas companies. And these companies have come together to say, how can we participate in a better way in the community? Well, how can we do it? We can work with small businesses, and we can build their capacity to be suppliers to the oil and gas industry, and so that they can participate in the oil economy. And 5 years in this program, there are 2,700 jobs created, $210 million worth of contracts that have gone to local companies that wouldn't have otherwise gone to local companies. Well, it's a great success story for the Angolan businesses, but guess what? They're getting their goods cheaper, they're getting their goods faster, they're getting their goods with less environmental impact. And the fact that it's okay to talk about both sides of that equation now is, I think, what's changed here. And it's thrilling to see it, and it's thrilling to see the support in the room for it. And what's changed, I think, on the nonprofit side as well is it's okay for us to talk about the fact that we have to be business-minded, that we can't just collect checks and go out and do some good work and hope the next check is coming in, but that, in fact, we need to operate as a business. We don't have shareholders, but we certainly have stakeholders that we're responsible to. And so we really have to learn from all of the businesses that are on the podium today about how we look at being sustainable. Learn from you, and then also partner with business on the ground in the countries you're working with to find market-based, demand-driven solutions that meet your needs, that bring value to the corporations, and that bring great value to the communities. And it's really a revolution. It's a slow revolution, but I think it's picking up speed. It's picking up speed when we see IBM jump into the game with sending 500, 1,000 people a year to go for 1 month assignments. I mean, imagine what that undertaking is. But not only is IBM making the commitment, but the organizations on the ground that receive these volunteers make a huge commitment. It's a lot of time investment. They have to be serious about it. They have to have a very specific scope of work because they're not going out to paint schools. They're going out to use their core skill sets to help to solve development challenges. And so we have to be able to go out there and measure the impact of that too. The impact is not that we sent 1,000 people. That's great for IBM. But what's the challenge that we've solved? And we can go out and take a look and say, how meaningful is it that these 10 people worked in Cross River State, Nigeria for the last month? Well, it's hugely meaningful for Cross River State, Nigeria, because they now have a social welfare department, the only state in Nigeria that has a social welfare department. And they have one that's highly functioning because they've had IBMers sitting there looking at policies and procedures, looking at supply chains in terms of how they're going to get free drugs out to the community, looking at how you can use technology to be more effective. So these are the kind of things we're seeing and the kind of things we're thrilled to see because this makes it entirely sustainable. And that's the key in the end.
Thank you, Deirdre. So I greatly wish we could go on another hour, but I know we can't. The questions that are in my brain, of course, go to can we bring to mind, can we make more intentional as corporations, as American citizens working in American corporations, what John put on the table, that the very things we are doing to create wealth, to create jobs, to ensure that we have sustainable practices in the countries and communities we serve, that itself is aiding this whole notion of stability, economic growth, and ultimately peace. That's pretty darn good. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us from wherever we sit, and some of us sit in corporate America, some of us sit in NGOs, some of us sit in government, some of us just want to go and do something that's going to change the world, that it's incumbent upon us to understand how these institutions work, how they talk to each other, and how we can leverage the assets each of us brings to the table to get this job done. So I'm delighted, and why I think this summit is so important, that I hear a lot of talk in the hallways and that there's a lot of exchanging of ideas. I want to thank our panelists, each one of them. Again, Ingrid, I thank you, and let's give them a big hand.
Before you all retire on into the hallways and